Play. All right. You know what? I think we'll start with a song like we did this last time. Let's see if we can get this. Oh, it was already on. There we go. There we go. Who knows this song? You Never Mentioned Him to Me. Maybe a few of us. This is a song that really conveys what we talked about, the great need last time. You never mentioned him to me. When in the better land, before the bar we stand, how deeply grieved our souls will be. If any lost one there should cry in deep despair, you never mentioned him to me. You never mentioned him to me. You helped me not the light to see. You met me day by day and knew I was astray, yet never mentioned him to me. Oh, let us spread the word wherever it may be heard. Help groping souls the light to see, that yonder none may say, you showed me not the way. You never mentioned him to me. You never mentioned him to me. You helped me not the light to see. You met me day by day and knew I was astray, yet never mentioned him to me. You never mentioned him to me. You helped me not the light to see. Yonder none may say, you showed me not the way. You never mentioned him to me. All right, we'll go ahead and get there. To me, that song always gets me because I know I'm not doing my job. I know there are people that I meet and that I see probably every week that I don't say anything to. And there may come a day where I might have to face that. And that is humbling, that's challenging. I think that's something that we all have to think about, right? And so last week we talked about the great need. And indeed, the need is great. We all know that we have a responsibility to share the gospel. We all know there are souls in this world that need to be told. And so we have the responsibility. We need to do that. We need to do that ourselves. That's something we are told specifically to do, that if we are to be disciples of Jesus, we are to love our fellow man enough to be able to share the gospel with them. And so I want to give you an illustration. You see this pond on the screen here. I want you to imagine this pond. It's about 4 feet deep. As you can see, there are chunks of ice floating in this pond. It is just bitterly cold. And in fact, if you go in there, you'll die in 3 minutes. That's how cold it is. Let me ask you, could I get you to go in that pond? No. However, what if I told you there's a 4-year-old that's drowning? The 4-year-old is about 3 feet tall. He can't reach the bottom. And he is drowning in that pond. Would you go into those waters then? You see, evangelism is all about love. If we love someone enough, we will brave those icy, chilly, bitterly cold waters of evangelism in order to share the gospel with that person because we love them. That's how we have to think about evangelism, is even though it's going to be uncomfortable for the majority of us, even though it's not going to be pleasant, even though it's going to be scary, we need to jump into that pond and save the souls that need saving. We touched on this verse last week, 2 Corinthians 5, verses 20 through 21. Now then, we are ambassadors. We are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were pleading through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. God is pleading through us. We are the means that God has chosen to share the gospel with this generation. And God is pleading with the world through us. And we need to take that responsibility on ourselves. God is using us as his means to plead through the world. What a thought. And so today we want to talk about, well, we know we need to share the gospel. We know that this is a responsibility that we have to do. How do we just start the conversation? Sometimes that's the hardest part, right? Just starting the conversation with someone to move things towards a gospel conversation. Sometimes that's the part that scares us the most. What are some strategies that we can take in order to start the conversation? So first, what I want to do is I want to look at some biblical examples of how Jesus and others started the conversation. And then I want us to also just talk about some practical things that we can do to be able to start the conversation ourselves, some tools that we could use, some tools that we can use to practice. We're going to talk about these. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from those of you here today. What are some ways that you have started the conversation in the past? What are some times of success, but maybe even times that didn't work? I think we can learn a lot from each other. Well, I tried this, but this didn't really work, right? There are some things that we can learn. In science, we actually learn more usually from the failures than the successes. And so we can learn from both sides, the times that worked and not the times that didn't work so well. But first, I want to establish a couple ground rules when we're starting to have a conversation with someone, okay? Consider the following quote. It's not the Christian life to wound, embarrass, or play one-upsmanship with colleagues, friends, or even opponents, but it's a common vice that anyone can easily fall into. When we're wanting to have and start the conversation with someone, we don't want to belittle that person that we're talking to. We don't want to try to embarrass them. That shouldn't be our goal, right? Even if it's someone who is an opponent to us, what is our end goal if we're talking to that someone? For them to obey the gospel, for them to become a Christian, right? Is belittling them or embarrassing them going to direct them in that way? No, right? It's going to oppose that, probably. So that should not be our strategy. That should not be our goal when we're starting the conversation with someone. Another one here. When discussing controversial issues, be careful not to resort to slick rhetoric, empty slogans, loaded words, ridicule, or name-calling. This is misleading and unkind, and it won't persuade a critic. Use a reasonable argument instead. So we shouldn't say, "What? You believe that? Only stupid people believe that," right? That's not the type of thing that we want to say when we're starting a conversation with someone. We also shouldn't, sometimes we get into the habit of, "Oh, you know what? That slogan sounds really good. That just flows right off the tongue," right? We don't want to convert someone to slogans. We want to use an argument from the Bible in order to convince someone, not just a slogan that we come up with, okay? So those are some of the ground rules when we're starting the conversation with somebody. All right, so now let's look at a few ways in the Bible that various people started the conversation. So let's start with the greatest man to ever live. Let's start with Jesus. What are some ways that Jesus started the conversation? Turn to John chapter 4. John chapter 4, read with me verses 7 through 10. John 4, starting in verse 7. A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Can you give me a drink?" For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." So one good way that you can start the conversation is by asking a question. If you read a lot of evangelistic literature and things like that, this is a very common strategy in the literature. Simply ask someone a question. It's a fairly non-threatening type of way because it puts the ball in their court. If you genuinely want to know what they're thinking, want to know how they feel on a subject, you can ask a question. Okay? By asking the question, and Jesus being Jesus, he anticipates her answer, Jesus is able to quickly steer the conversation into a spiritual conversation. Just by asking about physical water, Jesus knows that she is going to be thinking, again, in terms of physical terms, and he is able to direct the conversation directly into a spiritual conversation by the response that that woman gives. This is known as the Columbo tactic. Does anyone know who this guy is? I tell you the truth, I don't know who it is. I'm too young. I don't know. I did not grow up watching this show. But apparently this guy's name, I believe, is Lieutenant Columbo. And he is known as kind of being a bumbling guy who doesn't really feel like he knows what he's doing, right? But when Columbo goes into investigation mode, there's a tactic that he uses, right? He usually says something to the effect of, "Look, I got a problem. Something about this bothers me. Maybe you can clear it up for me. Do you mind if I ask you a question?" And then he says, based on the response, "Thank you. You're a very intelligent person. Oh, just one more thing," right? And then finally, his response is something like, "I'm sorry, I'm making a pest of myself. It's because I keep asking these questions, but I can't help it. It's a habit." But you see, this Columbo tactic is a habit that we all should develop. This habit of asking investigative questions, trying to get to the heart of the issue or the heart of the person. That is a very easy way that we can start a conversation with someone and direct them into a gospel conversation. Another example. We'll just go over a summary real quick. So the Columbo tactic, summary, it uses questions to guide the conversation forward. These questions are interactive, right? You are constantly interacting with this person as you're asking. And you ask follow-up questions. You don't just stop with one, but based on the response, you ask follow-up questions to continue the conversation. You're inviting the person that you're talking about to participate, and while you're doing that, the stress level is going down, right? A stress level is going down for you because you're getting more comfortable talking to that person, and also for them because they're knowing, oh, this guy, he's not going to beat me up or anything, right? The more that you ask the questions, the more you interact with them, the stress level goes down for everyone. Questions make headway without requiring you to state your case yet, right? You can gain a better understanding of what someone believes without you yourself stating what your case is yet, right? That will come later once you've developed that conversation a little bit. And questions shift the burden of proof to the other person. It makes them explain their position instead of you being forced to explain your position. And so it's a way that it can be less stressful for you, and it can get you just comfortable when you're talking with this person and having this conversation. Makes easy conversation and avoids unnecessary conflict at the start. All right? Another example of Jesus, Matthew 16. Let's turn here, please. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 16. And let's read verses 13 through 15. Matthew 16, 13 through 15. When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And so they said, "Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So do you see Jesus employing the Columbo tactic in these verses? He's asking these pointed questions, right? Who do people say that I am? This is a clarifying and leading question. He wants to clarify with who he's talking about what it is they believe. And then it leads them to further on down in the conversation where he ultimately wants to go. Okay? So he begins with this clarifying question, who do people say that I, the Son of Man, am? And then he probes deeper. Based on the response, he says, but who do you say that I am? Right? That's what Jesus wants to know. Who do you say that I am? That's the point that he ultimately wants to get to after asking that first question. Okay? He draws out the disciples' beliefs before making the teaching point that he wants to make. One more. The lawyer. Let's turn to Luke chapter 10. Luke 10, starting in verse 25. Luke 10, 25. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And he said to him, "What is written in the law? What is your reading of it?" And he answered and said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live." But he, wanting him to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus answered and said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, who stripped him of all his clothes, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal, brought him into the inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, "Take care of him, and whatever you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves?" So in this exchange, we have kind of an exchange back and forth of questions, right? If someone comes and asks you a question, sometimes it's best to actually respond with another question, to ask a clarifying question, right? I saw an example of someone said, maybe someone makes a statement of, "I don't believe in God." Someone then could respond, "Well, what do you mean by God? What is your definition of God?" To be able to clarify what that statement was, right? And so again, if someone makes an accusatory statement or a question in this case, you can also respond with a question to be able to clarify their beliefs and to be able to gain better understanding about what they're asking. Okay? The rich young ruler is another one. I think for the sake of time, I think we'll continue on with this one. We might come back later if we have time. So now I want to ask you, what are some questions that you may ask to start the conversation with someone? What are some questions that you have asked others in the past that have led to a good spiritual or biblical conversation? Any examples you can think of? Yes. Yeah, would you like to have a Bible study, right? That's a great question to ask. Any others that come to mind? Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Nick says that when you talk to someone, they usually are already going to some church somewhere. They're going to some denomination. And so if you know a little bit about that denomination, thanks to Brother Brian Ward's excellent class of denominations, we can ask a question about that, right? And say, "Hey, what I heard you all might believe this. What is that on how you understand it?" And try to start the conversation that way. Similar, Nick, you can say, "Do you go to church anywhere?" Right? That's a really simple question that you can start the conversation with them having. Yeah, Chris. Are you a Christian? Yep. Yes. Yeah. If Yeah. Are you a Christian? Depending on what they say, if they say no, you could say, well, would you like to be? Or would you like to learn more about being a Christian, right? If they say yes, you can say, well, tell me about that. How did you become a Christian? How do you follow Jesus? What does it mean to be a Christian? Ted. Yeah. Ted actually employs two strategies in his response that we're going to talk about later. Ted says, first, if it's someone at work, he says, look, I see you and you're a very impressive person. That's actually a complimentary tactic, which we're going to talk about later, right? But then you have another question of, do you go to church somewhere or things like that, exactly. Some others that I've used and heard in the past, some just kind of thought-provoking. What do you think happens when you die? Right? That's another one that's people think about that, even if you're not a Christian, right? Everybody has a moment in their lives when they think about, what happens when you die, right? That's another one that you can start a conversation with. Or, Gary, yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Gary makes a good point that we can think of it a lot of the times like we're making general conversations of, hey, how about those Cowboys, or did you play football or something? Or were you active playing football? You can turn the conversation similarly in asking your pointed questions to try to drive to evangelism topics. All right. Thank you very much for all of your input. Really, really good stuff. Another one that Jesus employs is he basically just says, follow me, right? Let's turn to Matthew chapter 4. Matthew 4, verses 18 through 20. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Then immediately they left their nets and followed him. Another case, Matthew 9 and 9. Matthew chapter 9 and 9. And Jesus passed on from there, and he saw a man named Matthew sitting in the tax office, and he said to him, follow me. Then he arose and followed him. One more, John chapter 1. John 1, 43 through 46. John 1, 43 through 46. The following day, Jesus went up to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, follow me. Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said to him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And Philip said to him, come and see. And so we might be able to not apply the identical tactic, hey, follow me, right? Drop everything and follow us. But we might be able to do something similar, right? This is something that my mom developed, actually. My mom created these come sit with me cards, okay? And so basically it's just something very simple. I created these for us real quick. If anyone is interested, we could certainly print these off. But has your website information, has your service times, has your church address. You write your name there and you write your phone number, okay? Whenever we're interacting with someone at the grocery store, or Colton and I were just on the road, right? We were on the road from Kerrville, and we were coming back up, and we stopped in a gas station, and we were just talking. We were like, man, I wish we could just talk to someone like in the gas station and be able to, but we just don't have enough time. But maybe, you probably couldn't say, come sit with me to someone at the Kerrville gas station, right? But you want to give them something. But if you're interacting with someone in your local area, how easy is it to just say, hey, we're having worship on Sunday. Come sit with me. We would love to have you. I would love for you to join us. Very simple, very non-intimidating, right? Now, I will say, I don't think our job starts here. We have more of a job than to just say to someone, come sit with me and call our job done, right? We have a bigger job than this, but this is a very easy way that if we have a very limited amount of time with someone, this is something that we can do, okay? This is another one that I just made up. These are just invitation cards. We also have 3 other ones that I found. I went to the common area. This is one that I believe Brandon Teague and Shelley designed, I think. This is one that they made. We have access to right now that you can use if you like. We actually have two more. We have thank you for your service. May we serve you. This is something that if you go to a restaurant, right, you can hand these to your server. Thank you very much for your service. Please come join us and let us serve you at the Keller Church of Christ, right? Again, you can, if you want to, if you're a little maybe scared that day, you just tuck it in the little thing where you leave a tip, and they can have it and they can do what they want with it, right? Here's another one that I found. You are invited, and then this says the Keller Church of Christ. Who are we? You are invited by, you can write your name, Mark Merriweather, or whatever it is, and then you just be able to give them this. So these are tools that we have access to right now if you want to. Or if you like these, right? I'd be happy to print these off. I'm sure the elders will be able to help print these off, right? If these will be useful for you, we want to give these to you. That's what I want to give you, as I mentioned, as part of this class. I want to give you tools. I want to give you resources, whatever you can have to be able to go and to start the conversation and share the gospel with your friends, family, loved ones, and people in the community. That's our goal. Give you tools, give you confidence, and give you understanding. All right? Just another one. This one's a little more modern, if you like that. Okay? The thing is, we know some will choose not to follow. Matthew chapter 19, verses 21 through 22. Jesus said to him, "If you want to be perfect, go. Sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me." But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. There are going to be some people that, even if we try, even if we give it our best effort, they're going to say no. And that's sad. We wish that they would change their mind. But if they said no to Jesus, they can certainly say no to us too, right? And it's going to happen. But that doesn't change the fact that we need to do our best to try. We need to put every effort to try to find the ones that will follow us and that will follow Jesus. Those are the ones that we're searching for, right? Our job, as we talked about, we are seed spreaders. We are not soil inspectors. We are seed spreaders, not soil inspectors. Okay? Some will make excuses, right? Luke chapter 9. Luke 9, 57 through 62. Now it happened as they journeyed on the road that someone said to him, "Lord, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Then he said to another, "Follow me." But he said, "Lord, let me go first and bury my father." Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and preach the kingdom of God." A lot of times if we're talking to someone, they'll come up with an excuse. "Oh, I can't today, I'm busy." Even if they might not have something going on, right? Or they might say, "Oh, I've got a baseball game that I need to go to." Or the Cowboys are on TV. Why would I possibly want to miss that and talk to you about this, right? People are going to have excuses. But again, that doesn't change the fact that we need to do our best. And even if that means we need to miss the Cowboy game to teach someone, to talk to somebody, right? We need to be able to take whatever time is available and prioritize that in our lives because it's that important. Peter starts the conversation in a variety of ways. Let's turn to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2. I think you guys know where I'm going with this. 7 through 15. Then they were all amazed and marveled, saying to one another, "Look, are not all these who speak Galileans? And how is it that we hear each one in our own language in which we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites, those dwelling in Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Persia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya, adjoining Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. And we hear them speaking our own language, the wonderful works of God. So they were all amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, whatever could this mean? Others mocking said, they are full of new wine. But Peter, standing up with the 11, raised his voice and said to them, men of Judea and all who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you and heed my words. For these are not drunk, as you suppose, since it is only the third hour of the day. So Peter employs this strategy that he takes a physical statement made that they are drunk with new wine, and he turns that into a spiritual point. He takes a physical statement made and turns it into a spiritual point. And we can do the same with conversations that we have, right? If someone says, oh, it's just such a beautiful day today. The sun is shining. It is a beautiful day outside. You can say, the Lord God has made such a beautiful world. It is such a blessing that he has created this for us. Don't you agree? We can be looking for these opportunities to take simple physical statements made about this physical world and turn them into spiritual opportunities. This worldly statement, and then he turns it on its head, right, by making a clarifying spiritual statement. And Paul, how does Paul start the conversation? Let's turn to Acts 17. Brother Ted already stole my thunder here, but that's okay, Ted. I forgive you. Acts 17, starting in verse 22. Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. So how does Paul start off this conversation? He starts off by complimenting them, right? He says, wow, I see that in all things you are very religious, right? And then he's able to build on that and say, this unknown God that you have a statue of, this is the one that I want to talk to you about, right? And so that's another tactic that we can use, that when we're talking to someone, start off by complimenting them. As Ted said, I've noticed that you are just a really great person, that you do such a good job at work, or I see that you are such a good mother to your children. You just do a wonderful job. I wonder if I could tell you about my Father in heaven, right? So you can start off with a compliment that you then change the direction a little bit into a spiritual conversation. And then he expounds upon that compliment to teach them about the one true God. You can also start, it's a lot of times a good idea to start with common ground. I think, if I remember right, I think this was one of the strategies in the Jewel Miller film strips, I think a lot of the times, those started with things that were very agreeable. You start with creation. You start with things that just about everyone who calls themselves a Christian agrees with, right? And then when you start on that common ground, and when they build trust in you as you're discussing these things, then you can continue to add more and more to it based on the Bible to start, then transition to things that you might disagree about. Acts 13, 16 through 19. Acts 13, 16 through 19. Then Paul stood up and motioned with his hand and said, men of Israel, and you who fear God, listen. The God of his people Israel chose our fathers and exalted the people when they dwelt as strangers in the land of Egypt. And with an uplifted arm, he brought them out of it. And so Paul starts this conversation. He knows he wants to get to Jesus, right? That's his goal. He wants to tell people about Jesus. He wants to tell people the Messiah has come, but he starts with the common ground found of Judaism. He starts with the part that he knows that they will agree with, that Paul himself has been taught for decades, right? But he starts with that common ground before getting down to the part where they might disagree, the part that is more challenging for those people to accept. Start with common ground when you're starting the conversation. Okay, so now I want to hear from you. What are some strategies that you have employed that maybe we didn't cover here, how you have started the conversation with people? What are some things that you have found worked in your life? Gary.
I'm going to say something really radical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying anything that you're saying here diverge just a little bit.
Sure.
But sometimes just starting with people that are members of this church
Mm-hmm.
and asking, how is your family doing? And how are you doing spiritually?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Personally, I've even asked my doctor that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are you doing? How's your family? How's your spiritual life? How
Right.
are things going with you?
Yeah.
We can do it with, if we can start with, there are a lot of people that aren't here tonight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's some people that need God.
Yeah. We can start here. We can start by talking, how is your relationship with God, right? Having those conversations. And not only will it help them and encourage them, but will allow us to practice so that if we do talk to people in the world, whatever it is, we'll have that practice and that confidence going in. Chris. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chris says that when he has a Bible study with somebody, he takes, especially the first one, he takes like 45 minutes just getting to know somebody, asking about their life, just asking about their family and things, right? It's really helpful and good to get to know someone, one, so they recognize and know that you care about them. You care about them before you even open a Bible. Chris says the Bible's there, but talk to them and really get to know them before you even open the Bible. Steve.
Just simply asking them what questions they have relating to Scripture or doctrine or God or Jesus or creation. This is not for a person that has a really firm belief system already established. These are the people that are really searching. But that's also some of the most fertile ground.
Yeah. Steve says just asking someone, what Bible questions do they have? What questions do you have about God or Jesus, the Holy Spirit, right? We might have to prepare a little bit before we answer that one, but just asking them general questions, right? Of what are your questions about what the Bible says about these things? Yeah, he says especially for people that aren't super grounded in their faith, that are searching, that's a helpful strategy. All right? Be thinking about any others that you have. I do want to mention, this is something that my family and I have just started doing. These are called talking point cards, okay? There's hundreds of these cards, and they're basically just questions that you have to start the conversation, right? And so some of these here are, what gives you the most hope for the future, right? Or if someone told you, I don't believe in God, how would you respond? Or there are just tons of these little questions that you have that, one, you can ask yourself these questions and help yourself to prepare. But you could get it and you could work on it with your spouse. We have this on our dinner table And we ask our kids these questions. How great of a teaching opportunity is that with your kids? That my kids, Evelyn and Jaden, 5 years old and 7 years old, it's amazing the responses that they already have to some of these questions, right? Thankfully, a big part of that is the great Bible class teachers that we have at Keller. That's definitely a big credit too. But these, again, the point is to just make us comfortable. Comfortable in talking about these situations, giving us ideas of questions that we could ask other people because we care about them, right? Because our ultimate goal is to lead someone to Christ. Because we love them. There's a QR code, goes to Amazon. I know they're a little expensive, maybe you might think, or for cards. You could probably make your own and things like that if you want. I think they're $30 or something. The way I think of it, how often do we spend $30 going out to eat on Sunday? And how much more worth it is it just to make a one-time investment in a tool like this that we can use to help train ourselves? Yes, sir. Huh? $2 coupon. There you go. There you go. Any other parting questions or anything before we close? Yes, sir.
What about time?
Time.
You know, sometimes you sit down and you just want to go on and on and on, and that's not good. I mean,
Yes.
should there be time that we really are very cognizant of when we're talking to people?
I think that's,
So they don't talk to us, we get locked in hours or whatever.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and when, right, especially when we're starting the conversation, it doesn't have to be long, right? It doesn't have to be a long amount of time that we do that. It could be literally maybe 5 or 10 minutes where we start having this conversation, and then based on that, maybe you can give one of these cards, you could try to set up another time later with them, right? The other thing is, if we set up a study, we probably don't want to go a 3-hour-long study the first night, right? One, you'll lose their attention. We just don't have the attention spans. They might not want to come back, honestly, if you're doing that for 3 hours, right? And so we do need to be cognizant of their time as well as our time, right? And to be able to be accountable and thinking of time. Yes, sir.
And you can ask,
Yeah.
how much time do you?
Yeah.
And they come back and say, oh, maybe a couple hours.
Right.
Yeah, about 30 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
You can tone them down. It's kind of like a guy that wants to make the last comment after 2 bells.
Yes. No, exactly. That's a really good point. Ask them, how much time do you have, right? And if they say, well, I've only got like 15 minutes, you can say, great, let's do it, right? If they're willing to give you 15 minutes, take whatever time they're willing to get. So, thank you all so very much for your time and all of your comments. I'm really enjoying this study already. If you have questions about this stuff or these other resources or anything else, please come talk to me. Again, I want to give you tools that you think you will use when you're going about your daily lives. Thank you very much.